It's a day that's meant for love, and it turned into heartbreak in a very disturbing way. A 31-year-old mom and school secretary is allegedly caught having sex with an 18-year-old student, and her enraged husband, who reportedly walked in on the situation, allegedly potentially got violent. Investigators in a small town arrived on scene for what they thought was just a battery report, but there was so much more to this story because they learned an alleged affair, and a very twisted one, was behind the rage, and it just scratches the surface of a deeper, darker story. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Valentine's Day is a day for romance, a day to show your loved ones just how appreciated and special they are. But in Union City, Indiana, that was allegedly not the case at one home. This is a developing situation that we're following from this very small Midwestern town. It is shocking, it is sickening, and it's nothing short of heartbreaking for so many people involved. And yet there is still so much more to learn about this case as it unfolds. But what we do know at this point is that a school secretary is in jail. There's a battery investigation underway, and 2 school students are alleged victims in this story. So let's get into it. Let's go back to Valentine's Day, February 14th, and that is when the Union City Police Department was notified of an alleged battery. The victim, 31-year-old Alicia Hughes. Her husband was also involved, and the 2 of them share 3 young boys together. Look, that is an incredibly sad call to get on Valentine's Day, but in this case, it was just the beginning. Officers on the scene learned that the night before, Hughes's husband had walked in on her, allegedly having sex with an 18-year-old. And police say the husband was upset and it turned physical. He confronted the pair. Now you have to imagine just how Hughes's husband could be feeling at that moment. And he just walked in, allegedly catching his partner, the mother of his children, being intimate with another person in your own home, and a very young person at that. All of this just hours before Valentine's Day. But what made this situation even more disturbing is the fact that Hughes is a school secretary at the Randolph Eastern School Corporation in Randolph County, Indiana, and it is very close to where they live. And that 18-year-old that she was allegedly caught with was a student in the district's high school. After reportedly catching Hughes and the student red-handed, Union City police say there was an alleged altercation that ensued between Alicia Hughes and her husband, and Hughes was allegedly beaten up. Now, at the time of this recording, the Union City Police Department says the Randolph County Sheriff's Office is investigating a case of battery, but no charges have been filed. A domestic violence call of this nature, it is very serious. It's inexcusable. And unfortunately, we see far too many situations involving domestic violence where infidelity brings out truly the worst in people. And there are even extreme cases where that rage becomes fatal. And we're talking about a murder investigation. Unfortunately, that's not what we're talking about here. In this situation, Union City police say that battery investigation, again, it's being handled by the Randolph County Sheriff's Office. And at this time, Hughes's husband has not been charged. But the case here, it's far from over. In fact, it gets much darker as we have learned more, because we got the probable cause affidavit for Alicia Hughes. And according to that document, a follow-up investigation was requested later that same day, Valentine's Day, regarding a complaint of child seduction, which in Indiana law means an adult in authority had sexual contact with a minor. The affidavit says an interview was then conducted at the Union City Police Department with a 17-year-old male victim. And here is how police described that interview in the court document. Quote, JV1, juvenile victim 1, stated he is a senior at Union City Junior Senior High School. He advised September 2025 he had called the school to report himself as absent. The Union City Junior Senior High School attendance secretary, Alicia Hughes, is who JV1 stated that he spoke with that day. JV1 stated that shortly after reporting himself as absent with Hughes, he received a text message from an unknown number accusing JV1 not really being sick. JV1 discovered this was the personal cell number of Hughes. The affidavit continues to go into more detail about Hughes's alleged relationship with this 17-year-old student. Quote, JV1 stated that the communication between him and Hughes was just a regular conversation. The two met in the Union City Harder Park and just had normal conversations. JV1 stated that the conversation changed to a sexual nature in late September or early October. JV1 stated he had met Hughes at the Union City Dollar General store. JV1 stated Hughes was wearing a dress and entered his vehicle, straddling him while he was seated in the driver's seat. JV1 undid his pants, and the two had sexual intercourse for the first time. JV1 stated that he and Hughes had sexual intercourse 4 additional times, once in Hughes's residence, once in JV1's car on the street in front of Hughes's residence, and twice in Harder Park near the soccer field. JV1 stated he ended the sexual relationship around the first week of November. All of the sexual encounters occurred within the Union City, Indiana city limits. There is a lot to take in when you read that, and it is incredibly disturbing, especially when you think of the age difference, 31 to 17, and the dynamic. This is someone who is employed at a public school, and we're talking about a student at that school as the victim in this case. Now, this entire situation allegedly began when Hughes was caught by her husband reportedly having sex with an 18-year-old student. Now, that is very disturbing. That student was legally an adult. So how does that factor into how this case could play out? This is an entirely different case, though. Investigators have learned that the 18-year-old is not the first student that Hughes has allegedly engaged sexually with, and the other high school student in this picture, who this 31-year-old woman has reportedly had sex with on at least 5 occasions, is even younger, at 17. And we'll get into all of this a little bit more in a moment, but I want to continue on in this affidavit because it goes into the officer's eventual conversation with Hughes. Quote, Hughes came to the Union City Police Department for an interview. This affiant read Hughes her Miranda warning, and she agreed to speak with me without a lawyer present. We began to talk about an incident that had happened the night before. This affiant asked Hughes about JV1. It was at that point Hughes requested a lawyer. Now, I want you to keep in mind, in Indiana, the official age of consent is actually 16 years old, but sexual conduct between adults and minor students under their authority is still considered a criminal offense, and a school secretary falls under that category of having authority over students. And because of that, Hughes was arrested and she was charged that afternoon with 5 counts of child seduction. She is currently being held at the Randolph County Jail in Indiana on a $25,000 cash-only bond. Now, the superintendent of the Randolph Eastern School Corporation released a statement the day after Hughes was arrested, and this is that statement. Randolph Eastern School Corporation is aware of the arrest of a district employee following a law enforcement investigation into allegations involving inappropriate conduct with a student. The employee has been removed from all duties with students pending the outcome of the legal process. Student safety and well-being remain our highest priority. RESC takes all allegations involving students extremely seriously. Upon becoming aware of concerns, the corporation fully cooperated with law enforcement and will continue to do so as the investigation proceeds. We appreciate the professionalism and diligence of local authorities in handling this matter. Because this is an active criminal investigation and to protect the privacy of students and the integrity of the process, RESC will not comment further on specific details at this time. We will continue to follow all legal and personal procedures required under state law and board policy. We recognize that situations of this nature are deeply concerning for our families, staff, and the broader community. Please know that we share those concerns and are taking this matter with the utmost seriousness, care, and urgency. Our focus remains on supporting our students and maintaining a safe, respectful, and supportive learning environment for all students. So here's what we know on the legal side. Hughes' first court appearance has been continued to Friday, February 20th, just a couple days from the time of this recording. And at that hearing, a judge is expected to formally discuss charges, set a bail, and advise Hughes on her rights, including an attorney. A motion was filed on February 17th for a no-contact order, though it is unclear who it's related to. As mentioned previously, Hughes was booked on 5 counts of child seduction. In Indiana, an adult in position of authority having sexual intercourse with a 17-year-old is considered a level 5 felony. On each count, she could face 1 to 6 years in prison, with a fine up to $10,000. Indiana's separate sex offender registration statute also requires registration for qualifying convictions, including child seduction, which could impact Hughes's everyday life for a long time. Joining us now is trial attorney Krista Ramey. You represent often young people who are victims of sexual abuse, and you look at this case, and it's just an ugly scene that allegedly played out at the house when the husband uncovered this, but then incredibly dark when you think of allegedly 5 times this school secretary had sex with a minor. When it comes to the part where the husband allegedly walks in and discovers this horrible scene involving his wife and what she is allegedly doing to this 18-year-old, like, how could that factor into, because this 18-year-old, he is considered an adult legally, though he is a student at the school, and all the charges right now are related to the 17-year-old, who we'll talk about in a moment. But that instant, how could that factor into this?
Well, I think that we have to look at it as a separate incident, and it's different and apart from any, responsibility that she has for what she did. Her husband has to account for his actions, whether he beat her up or this 18-year-old up, or both. This may be a mitigating factor that's considered in sentencing or in the actual charge that's done. It doesn't forgive the offense, but it does help explain that sudden passion when you walk in and you see your spouse with someone, in an intimate situation. You don't know what's going on. You're grabbing the kid off of her, or her off the kid, or whatever is happening. So he is reacting in the heat of the moment, if you will. So I think that you have to kind of parse that part of it out. But I think what it did is it triggered police to look into her a little bit more. And it started this investigation going into her and her contact with other students, because he was 18, but I believe he was a student at the high school in which she worked. So it's that contact that she had with a student, which is completely inappropriate, regardless of that student's age, if he's 18 or not. I mean, I was 18 by the time I graduated from high school. That doesn't make it, it wouldn't make it right, So it makes it not criminal, but it does, there is civil responsibility for that as well.
Yeah, because that's the thing, like, where you look at 17, 18, and there's a line there, the way the law looks at people as an adult, but this is still a very young person involved in this. Even though if legally you don't look at them as a boy anymore, legally seen as an adult. What stands out to you when you look at there's 5, the 17-year-old says that she sexually assaulted him 5 times. And, it was in multiple locations, whether it be a park, whether it be, I guess, in the Dollar General parking lot. What stands out to you beyond just, of course, crossing a line that should never be crossed, but just the way it seems she went about it?
Well, I think some of it, if I'm, reading this correctly, was actually at a soccer field, potentially on school property. And this contact started on school property. By this boy, calling in sick to school, and then her texting him back, saying, "Hey, you're not sick," and then starting this conversation, which is the beginning of grooming. And this is all happening on school property. And this initial contact is, and I would presume that there's more contact that's not sexual in nature that's occurring on school property that others should have seen and potentially reported as mandatory reporters. So there's a lot here in terms of the contact that she had with him, because it didn't happen overnight. This is happening over months, So you don't go from, texting a child once into sleeping with them in the Dollar General parking lot. It's a period of time that this is happening.
Yeah, and there's still a lot in this case that we don't know. And we don't know of any sort of, other than that text of saying that this student wasn't actually sick, like the digital footprint, which we do see in some of these cases, whether it's the inappropriate text messaging. We've seen teachers send videos to students. In this case, we haven't heard of that as of yet, but you do have her, because the story that plays out that it came from an unknown number. So presumably if she got that number of that student from a school database, and let's just say none of the activity happened on school property, but I mean, the school district right now could be liable. I know you work cases like this. Just even that action of her going into a school computer, if this is the case, gets that student's personal number and then has a conversation that she shouldn't be having with that student, because clearly he didn't know where her number was, so she got it from somewhere. What does that mean for the school district in terms of liability?
So this triggers in it me as a curious lawyer. If it's just that one thing that she did on school property, going into the student record and getting the phone number and texting him, if it's just that one thing, it's probably not enough to attach liability to the school. The school had to have been aware of something or should have been aware of something that was happening. Where I get curious and want to know more information is, this, like I said earlier, Chris, this didn't happen just immediately. This took months, and then there was contact back and forth. And so it's what was happening in the school environment that others should have seen, whether it's other people that work in the front office with her principal, who maybe she is the secretary for, should have seen, or an assistant principal, what other staff members should have seen. And I will tell you, as a parent, there is no situation in the world where a teacher, a coach, or anyone should have your child's phone number and should ever be texting them. They should not be contacting them by cell phone or social media. They contact you as the parent. And so that is alarming in and of itself, just the fact that this is occurring, that a school employee is texting a child. So you want to find out what that contact was and what others should have seen. But if it's just the one, like I said, probably not liability on the part of the school.
And in so many of these cases, and unfortunately we've covered a lot of them, there's always that moment where it crosses over from being that student-teacher relationship to something more. In some cases, we see teachers who are on Snapchat or Instagram communicating with students, and that certainly crosses a line on social media, or even having the personal cell phone number. On the criminal side of it, to this point, what type of evidence do you need? Because you have the 17-year-old who I assume would have to testify if this goes to trial. But what other evidence can they have that could prove that this 17-year-old is actually telling the truth about what happened here?
So no prosecutor is going to charge on the word of the 17-year-old alone. They're going to need corroborating evidence. And this is gotten in several different ways. And sometimes I've had it where my clients have been asked to make phone calls or text messages to the perpetrator, to their abuser, to get them, to bait them into giving them information that the police can then use to corroborate what they're telling. They'll also look at, there's a digital footprint here. There is, they will have the downloads from both the child's phone and the teacher's phone, and they'll be able to have that back and forth contact that existed. And there's going to be back and forth contact. I promise you, there's probably more than just text messages. There probably is pictures and videos as well. I would almost surely bet, at least of her going to him, if not the other way as well. And if it's the other way, then you have additional charges for CSAM materials, for child sex abuse materials that maybe we're going back and forth. So you're going to have, based upon just what's in this affidavit, some corroborating evidence that this actually did happen. Probably video footage from the Dollar General store parking lot cameras. They have those cameras all out in the parking lot to catch shoplifters. So, they're going to have some information that's going to corroborate all of this.
And I think too, and we'd be a long way from a trial, but, I'm sure this 17-year-old would be the star witness in this case, just speaking about the experience. But even if she's not facing charges, I think of her, husband, who could say that she's done this with somebody else, and I think in the court of public opinion, you read the allegations and then you hear that she was caught with someone else, even though that student was legally an adult. Could any of that be brought into the case as well, in talking about how these are her activities outside of school that can build the credibility of the 17-year-old, even if she's not facing charges for the 18-year-old?
Sure. Me Too evidence, it's called. You have to be careful as a prosecutor using Me Too evidence. We saw the Harvey Weinstein case get overturned because of the use of Me Too evidence. And I think the Bill Cosby case, one of the Bill Cosby cases as well. So you have to be careful with the Me Too evidence, that it's not piling on. And so the jury thinks then it's being used as bad character evidence, evidence if she did this before, she must have done it now, right? You can't use it that way. It's done as to show kind of modus operandi, that this is what she does. She's a predator this way and does these things, and this is her pattern.
What is the defense in some of these cases that you like? What is an effective defense for someone like Alicia Hughes, where let's just say there's more to the story, and we don't know if there is, but I mean, you do have what sounds like some very, a credible witness in the 17-year-old. We'll see how that plays out, and then what other evidence builds up. But in these cases where it is a he said, she said, what has been, what's an effective defense in a case like this?
Yeah. So a lot of it has to do with age too. So a 17-year-old is different than under 15 in most states. I'm not sure this is in Indiana. I'm not sure, in Indiana law, what if it's, if it's a different charge. So there could be pleas that could be had that lessen the charge, that, she still has to register as a sex offender. She still has to do certain things, but maybe she receives less time or no time or just probation, because, so this is about negotiating at this point. I don't think that in sentencing, when you're looking at it, if this is to go to trial, a judge, there's probably, like you said, Chris, there's probably others as well, because we have two. Is there more? And as this investigation continues, just charging right now, there's still work being done here, I promise you. And particularly when minors are involved. And so if there are others that could increase the likelihood of a trial and lessen the chance of being able to plea it out. But you're not going to get, with good corroborating evidence, unless it's just, I didn't do it, that wasn't me, and that's her defense. So I'd like to see what's on that corroborating evidence, in those cell phones, all of that, as a defense attorney, to be able to combat it.
For when it comes to the civil side of it too, so she has been, it's something along the lines of, I have it here from the statement from the superintendent, that she's been suspended pending an outcome of an investigation. She hasn't been full on fired. We see some school districts will fire a teacher on the spot. Other school districts maybe reassign them to, pretty much working from home and not really working, but they, go on the, you'll hear a school board member say, well, no one's been found guilty of anything yet. And then, eventually, if they are found guilty, they end up losing their job that way. From an attorney standpoint, if you are looking to potentially sue the school district on behalf of a victim, how much does that decision factor into the outcome of a civil lawsuit, of whether or not the district fired a teacher on the spot, or whether they allowed them to be suspended with or without pay?
It's going to play a big role. Under Title IX, and this triggers a Title IX investigation. Title IX isn't just about equity in sports, right? It's also about sexual abuse and sexual harassment by students or teachers, or teacher to teacher. I mean, it covers everyone that's in that school environment. So when you have a teacher that's sexually abusing a student, the student would file a Title IX complaint, which goes to the district, not the school. And the district then has to investigate under federal law. I look at these all of the time. They then are required to provide supportive measures to the student. They would have to get that person out of the environment while the investigation is pending. They would have to talk to witnesses. They would have to review documents and evidence, and they have to show all of that evidence to the complainant, in this case, the 17-year-old boy, for him to review and add to it. And it becomes a full investigation that the school is required to do under federal law. And so in state laws almost always have laws that mirror Title IX. And so if you have, if the school then violates Title IX further by not investigating this properly, by not protecting the child properly, once it finds out about potential criminal conduct on the part of this educator, in this case, the office worker, that could be another charge that's in a civil complaint against the school.
And I know you see cases like this all the time. We cover them regularly, but I have to say, this is the first time we've had a school secretary accused of this. We've seen it with teachers. There was a lunch lady a little while back who was accused, but not a secretary, who's very much like, you probably see them at the front desk if your mom drops something off. I remember the school secretaries at my, high school growing up. It's not like you typically have that type of relationship with them. I mean, how common, is it the person who's not the coach, not the biology teacher, not that person who has that very much more, I guess, central role in your day-to-day, where you see cases like this play out in schools?
It is unusual. You're right about thinking that, because it's usually someone that your child would have a lot of contact with. So it is the coach, the teacher that you're seeing, the counselor, the guidance counselor, someone that you're having quite a bit of contact with. Even the lunch lady you're having a lot of contact with, right? You're seeing that person every day. With the front office person, you're not developing a relationship with them naturally. And so it's very unusual to see it cross a line into something like that. Because with, the coach or the teacher, you'll see like increased time in contact with a student, giving them that one-on-one guidance. And then it, kind of goes from there, and it begins that grooming process. That is hard to see develop when you're talking about someone in the front office. Why are they having contact with the student on a regular basis? And how do you go from that to the Dollar General parking lot? I mean, it is rare to see it without someone that does have that intimate contact already with your student.
And that was the part, like when you read through the PC, like there's, they like met in a park, and then, the Dollar General parking lot allegedly happens. And like, there's definitely, and some PCs show more information than others. Like there's a lot of parts of the story that I think need to be filled in as this goes on. Cause this one, it just seems like it goes from zero to a very, very dark place very quickly, like in a Dollar General store. And then suddenly, allegedly, this is happening in the parking lot.
Yeah. Like it went from, they were texting to she literally straddles him in a car.
Right.
I was like,
yeah. And look, police officers, they're not there to, write a novel, that fills it in for everyone. It's about, the probable cause of what happened. But it definitely, there are, for those of us consuming it, kind of figuring out what happened in this case. Like there's definitely some areas that need to be filled in, but just a very, very sad story. I think that's the ultimate kind of part of it. Krista Ramey, always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Chris.
Alicia Hughes is expected to make that first court appearance on Friday, February 20th. She is innocent unless proven guilty in a court of law, and these are just allegations at this point. That will do it for this episode of On the Case presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. We're also streaming on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.